Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. This video is going to be my Geekly Wrap-Up for the week of January 6th through 12th. This week I managed to read 10 books and play 5 new board games. This was also the week that I went to OrcaCon, which is a really awesome local tabletop board gaming convention that's near to me in Seattle. So most of the games that I played, I actually played at the con, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later on in the video. So first, let's go ahead and do the books. So the first book that I finished this week was The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I know it's taken me like way long in terms of booktube time to actually catch up to this series, but I was very kindly given the audiobook version of it by my friend Tyler, so thanks for that because I really loved this book. I honestly confess that about halfway through it, I still wasn't really understanding what the hype was about this book, and I really didn't think it was going to be for me. But I talked to a couple of friends that had already read the series, and they said, no, stick with it, it gets better, and I'm really glad that I did. I'm not going to go too much into what it's about because it's kind of an older title, and I feel like a lot of people on BookTube have already talked about it extensively, but needless to say, I am looking forward to continuing with the series. The second book that I read this week, I finished a reread of The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This was the book club pick for Rachel Marie's Royally Booked Club that we were going to read for the month of January. I love reading this series during the winter months. I actually finished the trilogy in one of my December Geekly Wrap-Ups, I believe, is when I wrapped up reading the third book. So it was really nice to just seamlessly go back into reading the first book. And this is a story about Vasya, who is a young girl that is living in this sort of historical fantasy type place. It's Russia, like it's historical Russia, but there's also a lot of fabulism from it. So like all of the figures from Russian folklore and mythology, like the domovoi, who are the little like household spirits, and you know the firebird and all of those creatures are real, and she is one of the only people that both can see them and is not afraid of them. Rereading this book, a couple things that struck me: obviously the power of stories and storytelling, and how storytelling has the power to make real the unreal. Also the difference between the sort of respect that you gain through fear and the respect that you gain through love is something that is a major theme of this book. And also the importance of bravery. And bravery doesn't mean the absence of fear, but bravery means standing up and doing the right thing and protecting those who can't protect themselves. So I really enjoyed this. It's definitely worth 5 stars that I gave it originally, and I think I'm actually going to continue with rereading the series this winter. Then I read this little poetry pamphlet called Their Lunar Language by Charlotte Eichler. This was a book that I actually did a Library of Alexa's D20 TBR challenge, so this was one of the books that fulfilled that challenge, and it was pretty good. It was this author's first poetry pamphlet. It's got a lot to do with themes of animals and the sea. I thought it was interesting. I gave it 3 out of 3 stars. Then I finished a book that I have been reading for what feels like forever. It's only been about a month, but it feels like it's taken me forever to get through this book because I started it before I lost my dog, and then we got her back, and all of the holidays happened, and traveling, and blah, 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 blah. But I finally finished it this week, and it's Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, and I really loved this book. This is part of my year of reading romantically. I got it as a book of the month book because I saw it was a romance that featured a Black woman who's also disabled as a protagonist, and I was like, cool, that is something that I'm interested in. So not only does it help me fulfill my challenge to read 30 books by Black authors this year, I also am definitely going to enthusiastically recommend this if you are looking for good disability representation in your romance. So this is the story of Chloe Brown, who is a Black woman living in London, and she has fibromyalgia. And as often happens, as anyone that gets sick will tell you, sometimes when you get sick, a lot of your friends, you find out who your real friends are, because a lot of your friends will just sort of leave and go do their own things and pay lip service to supporting you, but they won't actually stay and do anything meaningful. So she falls into a pretty deep depression after that, and then realizes that she doesn't want to let her life just pass her by because she's really upset about losing all of her friends. So she decides that she needs to write this bucket list of daring things to do. It starts because she rather spontaneously climbs up a tree to help a stuck cat, even though she knows it's going to be really bad for her disability later on. And she's like, I should be more spontaneous like this. I want to do things that I want to do and not necessarily be totally, worried all of the time. I thought that this book was a lot about, like, as anyone with chronic illness will tell you, finding a fine balance between taking care of your body and, like, rationing your energy levels, but also remembering to, like, live a little and have fun, but also the importance of finding a partner who understands that your body does have limits that look different from everybody else's and who will be able to support you and care for you, etc. through all of that. She falls in love with this guy who's nicknamed Red, and she at first gets him to help her complete one of the items on her Get a Life list, which is to ride a motorcycle, because he has a motorcycle, so she kind of makes him take her for a ride on it, even though she's really scared. And they have great chemistry, and they start falling in love. I also thought, like, with so many romance novels, there's always communication problems that, like, throw a wrench into this, but the communication problems that come up in this book actually do make sense for the characters, and they make sense for their situation. And also, the characters have, like, a very normal reaction where, like, there's a communication problem, they automatically think, oh, worst case scenario, and then they go, well, wait, this doesn't really track with the person that I know and that I'm in love with. Let me see if there's, like, some other factors at play here, which there usually are. So I actually kind of liked how that was a bit more believable than a character just totally having a 180 in their opinion with another character. So I really enjoyed this book. Would highly recommend it. I then finished reading The Witches Are Coming, which is a feminist essay collection by Lindy West. She wrote Shrill, which got made into a TV show. I haven't watched Shrill, but reading the book actually really changed the way that I thought about feminism, body positivity, and the sort of the specific issues that fat people, particularly fat women, face in contemporary American culture specifically. Like, I'm not a fat person, so I did not really realize the extent to which fat people are, like, really maligned and made fun of and actually have very serious health disparities and other issues in this country because of the way that the, like, medical and social establishments really just shame them into silence and lack of resources. So this book is really much, it's not really about that. It's really much more about the fallout of the 2016 presidential election in the US and also the Me Too movement in the US. So this is going to come with some trigger warnings for discussions of rape and sexual assault, because that's kind of what the Me Too movement is all about. I don't know, like, I myself kind of found this weirdly comforting to read as someone that is a survivor of sexual violence, because the whole premise of the book is that, yes, there is a witch hunt on, but what the witches are coming is not for, it doesn't have anything to do with the assaulters and the abusers. The witches are coming for your legacy. They are coming for their future, the future that the witches have been denied because of oppression and patriarchy and all of that kind of thing. She has a lot to say about intersectional feminism, particularly where it intersects with race, and she has a really great chapter at the end of this book about the problem of gentrification in Seattle, which of course is very interesting to me because that's the area where I live, and this is not just an abstract thing that we're thinking about. It's something that is very much in your face every day, and you can really see in the number of people that are sleeping outside every day and the people that are getting pushed out from their neighborhoods because they can't afford to pay rent anymore every day. So I enjoyed that book quite a lot, even though it was a very intense read. I spread it out across the entire week. I then finished reading my favorite book that I read this week, which is The Illumination of Ursula Flight by Anna Marie Crowhurst. This is a historical fiction novel that takes place during the Restoration in England, so after the English Civil War, when the monarch is restored, and it follows this girl, Ursula Flight, who is a young writer. She is a, I guess, educated noblewoman who gets married off to a man who's much older than she is, because that's what happens to women in this time period. But she really longs for a life of adventure. She loves the theater, she loves going to plays, she loves writing plays, acting in them, etc. And this is basically like a story of her coming of age, coming into her own, being able to find and carve out a place for herself in the world where she's not defined by her relationship to a man, which especially for this time period is extremely radical. And the way that this book is written reads very much like a book that was written at that time as well. So you could really put yourself in the shoes of someone who was living during the 1600s, because you know, that doesn't seem like it's such a big deal to us now, you know, the fact that women should be able to control their own money and that they should be able to have control over their own bodies and their own children. But this book really does drive home like the dangerous place that she is put in, because her body doesn't even belong to her once she gets married. It's the property of her husband. So the fact that she decides to go out and pursue her own life goals and ambitions and earn money under her own name, etc., is a really powerful story. I really loved the way that this was written. I especially enjoyed reading about the friendship between her and Mary, who's one of the servants in the house when she's growing up, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, I also read a little children's picture book this week from the New and Interesting. I'm trying to read more books that are written specifically for kids and early readers, and this is called Paco and the Drum by Matthew Forsyth. He's one of the artists on Adventure Time, and this is a story about a little frog who gets given a drum by her parents and shenanigans ensue. This has some light, dark humor, so I think it would be perfect if your kid is like into that, or if you yourself are into that. The illustrations are extremely charming. They're done in this sort of like flat 2D style to great comedic effect. Definitely enjoyed that a lot, and I would highly recommend it. Also, frogs are one of my very favorite animals ever. If you watched my Bookie Trials video where I had my little frog demon, you'll know that. But I really love frogs, and so reading a delightful little children's book about frogs causing chaos in music was super wonderful. I then read another amazing book called Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. Akwaeke Emezi is a Black and Tamil descended non-binary author who I had never heard of before, but then once I actually read this book, I finally saw their work cropping up all over the place, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize these were all written by the same person. And this is the story of a young Black trans girl named Jam living in a society where there are no more monsters. The monsters have all disappeared, and the monsters are kind of this stand-in for any of the bad things that plague society. Her mother is a painter, and one day Jam is hanging out in her mother's studio, and she accidentally summons a creature out of one of her mom's paintings and makes it real, and it comes into the real world. The creature is called Pet, and it announces that it has come to hunt the monster that is in the town where she lives. And she's like, what are you talking about? We got rid of the monsters long ago. There aren't monsters here anymore. And Pet says, no, like, I'm here because there are monsters here and they need to be destroyed. So things happen. This book comes with some trigger warnings for discussions of child sexual abuse, and so be aware of that if you are sensitive to it going in, but this was absolutely one of the most amazing books that I have ever read. Just the first chapter alone does more to advance the cause of trans and non-binary representation in literature than just about anything I have ever read for young adults. This story is also a lot about the way that art calls forth and can make real a lot of issues in our lives. Art is very important when it comes to understanding and interrogating the way that we think about things, as Jam literally brings a piece of her mother's artwork to life and then that is like able to give voice to the problems that exist in their town. It also is really about the fact that memory is super important, because if we don't remember monsters, and if we don't remember the monstrous things that happen in the world, we won't be able to recognize the warning signs that they might be coming back. And that is a huge theme that's explored within this story. It kind of reminded me, like, I've worked with kids a lot and you have to do a lot of child sexual abuse training. It reminded me of what they always say in those classes, which is that we don't catch abusers abusing, we catch them breaking rules. And I kept thinking of that when I was reading this book, because I remember being like, oh, that's kind of weird. That's a red flag. That's, interesting. And it's a lot about the importance of speaking up when you see something like that, because the very worst. So this book was incredible. Gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I'm realizing now that my camera is about to run out of battery, so what I'm probably gonna do is finish talking about the books, and then I'll do a separate video wrapping up the board games and the stuff that I did at the con. So I've got 2 more books for you. I also read Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. This is a multi-generational story that is told beginning at one of the main characters' like Sweet 16 sort of coming out birthday party, something like that, and it goes all the way back through her family history with different chapters being narrated by different people in her life. I've only ever read one other book by Jacqueline Woodson before. I read Sing Unburied Sing because I got an arc of it back when I was working at a bookstore before it came out. This one is definitely written in a much more poetic or verse style. It's not really a novel in verse, but it's extremely close, like the line between verse and prose in this book. And I think that that was awesome because it definitely contributed to both differentiating the voices of all of the characters and also making them seem as though they were part of a collective whole and part of a family, which is a large part of what the actual like subject matter of the book is. Like, what does it mean to be part of a family and carry shared family history, shared family trauma, shared family like hopes and dreams for the future, and how those metamorphose across generations. This book definitely also comes with some trigger warnings, mostly for like racism and racist violence, police brutality, that kind of thing. It very intensely engages with the Tulsa Massacre, which is something that I'll actually link some information down below. It's been a lot in the consciousness lately because it was depicted in the HBO Watchmen series, and a lot of people I realized didn't know that this had happened. I only knew about it because I had listened to a podcast about it. I did not learn about this in school or any other way. So I'll go ahead and link some information down below there, and that also comes with trigger warnings for racist violence. So just be warned if you want to go learn some more about that. But I thought that this book was absolutely incredible. I feel like I'm going through this phase where the books that really touch me the most are the ones that are these very intense, often painful, but nonetheless important family stories, whether that comes in terms of fiction or memoir, nonfiction, or whatever it may be. I'm really enjoying reading these books where families get together to tell their stories, and you realize that to each individual within the family, it's as if they all live in a different family. Yet when you read all of their voices together as a whole, you can kind of see how the composite actually creates what we would call a family. I have lots more thoughts about that, but again, like I said, my camera's about to die, so I have one more book. This is No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference, which is the collected speeches so far of Greta Thunberg. She is a climate activist from Sweden. You've probably heard about her unless you have recently been living under a rock, because she has been organizing a school strike to protest politicians' inaction in the face of climate change. I am particularly interested in reading what she has to say because we share the same autism diagnosis, so I've really enjoyed getting to watch her just thrive as she goes and speaks truth to power of what she's very passionate about. And this has definitely given me some concrete things that I can learn more about in terms of changing my own behaviors and my own decisions as it pertains to climate justice and activism, etc. So those are all of the books that I read this week. I'm going to make a second video, which I will have linked up here, that is going to be about the board games and the convention. Thank you all so very much for watching this, and I will see you in part 2 of this very long Geekly Wrap-Up. Bye.